Hi everyone and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy and in this video I'll be showing you how to create the bundled up ornament pattern. The bundled up ornament was designed by Sherry, one of the designers here at the Ornament Girl, and with this pattern I'll be showing you how to create this adorable rosy-cheeked snowman who's bundled up and all ready for a snow day. The best part is you can get this adorable quilted ornament look with no sewing at all. Before we get started, be sure to check out the links below the video to download your free printable supply list, which will help you gather all of the materials needed for your ornament. As a quick reminder, this pattern, along with all Ornament Girl patterns, is copyrighted and it's illegal to teach or distribute it without our permission. If you have a friend you think would enjoy making this ornament, be sure to send them the link to this free video tutorial. In order to complete this pattern, you will need a couple different foam shapes, satin straight pins, fabric, embellishments, and some ornament making tools. Be sure to check out the link below the video to get your free printable supply list, which will give you all of the correct quantities and measurements for each of your materials. Once all of your tools and materials are gathered, we can begin creating your bundled up ornament. The first thing we're going to do is go ahead and prepare your baby-sized Hemi-shaped foam pieces to become the earmuffs for our snowman. We're going to do this first so that you have time to set them aside and let the glue dry while we create the rest of the pattern. So you're going to need your two baby Hemis and your glue. You could use any type of craft glue or glue dots. I'll be using my hot glue gun, but really any type of tacky glue will work. And then you'll also need the string that you want to wrap around your Hemi. Now this step is optional, but if you're using colored string on a white piece of foam, you may want to first color your foam in the same color of the string so that when any foam shows through, it's the same color instead of white. And like I said, this is totally optional. You could choose to do this step or just choose to skip it, but I'm gonna go ahead and color each of my Hemis. And another quick tip, if you have a pearl head pin handy, you can stick that into the bottom of the foam and that gives you a little bit easier way to hold on to it. So if you want to color your Hemis, go ahead and do that now. And once you have your little Hemis covered, you're ready to add the string. And depending on what type of marker you used, you might end up with some ink all over your fingers like I did, but that's okay. That's just part of being crafty sometimes. So don't worry too much if that's smearing off. But what you're going to do to create these little earmuffs is you're going to glue this string in a spiral all the way around the Hemi. Using your glue or glue dots, and just use something to protect your working surface, add a little bit of glue to the edge of the Hemi, and then lay your string right on that glue. And now you're going to glue and wrap this string all the way around the piece of foam. So I'm just adding a couple little bits of glue here, enough just to hold it on the foam, and then laying my string down along the edge of the Hemi. And you can see how we're already starting to create that edge. And this can get a little messy depending on the marker and the glues you used, but like I said, that's just the fun of crafting sometimes. And this will take you a little while because you want to take your time and make sure you're getting everything lined up really nicely. So you can just take your time and be patient, working with this string and this glue. And then when we approach the starting point of our string, which I'll be doing in just a second here, we're just going to bump up to create a spiral. So we're just going to do continuous spirals all the way around this Hemi. So now I'm at the beginning of my string. I'm just coming right above it. And then my next row, I'm going to have sitting right up against that sparkle string that I already added. And once you get some string on there, it gives you a little better spot to hold on to that isn't just covered in marker. And I am left-handed, so I'm holding my Hemi in my right hand and working with my string and my glue in my left hand. But you just be sure to do this however is most comfortable for you. And that allows you to get a nice tight spiral on your string with minimal foam showing if possible. All right, so I'm just going to keep working this string all the way up to the top center of my Hemi, just like I have been with these first couple rounds. So you can go ahead and take your time to wrap this string and glue it all the way around your little baby Hemi piece of foam. As you approach the top center of your Hemi here, you're just going to continue your spiral, working inward toward the center, getting those curls as tight as you can right next to each other. And at some point, you will get down to the point where you only really have space to lay down that sparkle string one more time. So I'm continuing to add glue and just folding this back on itself. And I'm gonna do that until the very top center is covered, just like this. And I'm gonna let that dry just a little and then just snip off the extra right up close to the Hemi, and it will already be glued down in the center there. And now your first baby Hemi is covered, and you can go ahead and repeat those exact same steps to cover your second Hemi with the same string. Once you have your two baby Hemis prepared, you can go ahead and just set those aside. And even if you can't get all of the ink off of your fingers, you may want to just wash your hands, because we will be working with white fabric and you don't want any extra ink to be rubbing off on the color of your snowman. So maybe just try to get that ink off if you can, and then we can move on to the next step. Before we can add any fabric to our foam Hemi, we are first going to need to make a line across the center for attaching our two pieces. So linked below the video, you will find our template for dividing an Ornament Girl soft foam Hemi. You can go ahead and print this foam dividing template and then cut it out along the dotted lines. And now with your 4-inch soft foam Hemi, you can just lay this down centered right inside that template that you printed. And this template is for dividing the Hemi into lots of different segments, but we just need one line right down the center. So what we're going to do is just use our pen to mark the foam in line with one of these dash marks. So I'm just recentering my piece here. I'm marking in line with this top center dash mark and then with the bottom center dash mark. And those are the only two segment lines we need, because we're just going to connect them to divide this foam piece in half. Now you can use your flexible tape measure as a straight edge to connect those two opposite dash marks that you just created, creating a nice straight line, and then use that straight edge to draw that line all the way across the center. And just like that, we have the center line, which will help us line up our fabric pieces and the headband for the earmuffs. And now we are going to attach our pieces of fabric number 1. This is the color for the snowman. And you're just going to lay this piece across the foam, extending it about 1/4 of an inch past that center line. So here's my line, and the edge of my fabric is going about 1/4 of an inch past that. And then you want equal amounts of fabric extending on the left and right edges too, so that you can wrap the fabric around the bottom of the Hemi as well on both edges. And now you're just going to use a few pins along that line to hold the fabric in place. For this first piece of fabric, we don't need a whole bunch of pins because we'll be adding more pins when we add our second piece. So just add about maybe 5 pins to hold this one in place along that line. And once that first piece is in place, we're now going to add our next piece. And this time we want the right edge only coming about 1/8 of an inch past that center line. And you still want enough fabric to fold it down along the left and the right edges as well. So I'm just making sure there's enough fabric that I could fold those ends over the edge of the foam. And then I'm gonna pin it in place at the top center. And then when you smooth that fabric out, I can still see my dark line through my white fabric there. I only want my fabric to be coming about 1/8 of an inch past that center line. And now you can use lots of pins to help hold this in place. So I'm gonna do a whole pin line across that line that we drew, helping to keep my fabric nice and smooth in a straight line across the foam. And when you're pinning near the edge of your Hemi, make sure that you angle your pins in toward the thicker part of the foam because you don't want to accidentally pin right through this corner and poke yourself. Now I'm just going to flip this around and complete the pin line, keeping that fabric nice and straight along the other half of the foam. And once you have those pieces pinned in the center, you're now going to work your way around the foam, folding the fabric over the edge, and you want to keep it as smooth on the round side as possible. And then you're just going to pin it in place down here at the bottom of the foam. And along the flat side of the Hemi, this does not have to look pretty at all because this flat side won't be showing in the finished ornament. We're just going to have the rounded side showing. So you want to take your time and really try to sort of pull on anywhere you have these pleats. You're going to pull them down and pin. And you won't be able to get everything perfectly smooth along the round side. I'll show you on my finished example here. Sometimes there are still a couple of little ripples showing from your fabric, but that's okay. It doesn't really affect the outcome of the final ornament. You'll just see a couple of those little ripples, and that's totally fine. So you're just going to keep working your way all the way around the foam, smoothing the fabric out over the round side and pinning it on the flat side with both pieces of fabric. You're trying to get both sides as smooth as possible, but if you can't get it perfectly smooth, don't worry too much. So you're just going to keep working your way around the ornament, smoothing and pinning the fabric wherever you can to get it to lay nice and smooth on the rounded side of the foam. And another quick note as you're doing this, if you have a large ripple that you can't smooth out, if you could work it toward this center line, it will eventually be covered by the earmuffs and the center ribbon piece. So if you are able to sort of work that over toward the center, it's more likely to be covered. And like I said, it's not going to be totally smooth and totally perfect, but you just want to get it as close as you can. Once you have those fabric pieces smoothed out the best that you can get them, you can trim away all this extra fabric in the center of the bottom part of the hemi. And it doesn't have to look pretty because, like I said, this is going to be completely covered up. We're just getting rid of this extra fabric so the bulk of it is out of the way. And now that we've prepared the top half of our snowman, we can start making his scarf. Before we cover our flat foam disc, we first want to trace it onto our felt piece. The felt is optional, but it can be used to help cover up the bottom center of your ornament. So we're just going to trace the outside of this foam disc onto our felt square so that if you decide to use the felt, you'll be able to cut this out later on. You can go ahead and set the felt aside, and now we will cover this foam disc with fabric. To create the scarf, you are going to use your long strips of fabric to create the scribble fold along the edge of the disc. So you want to fold your fabric piece in half lengthwise, holding it with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold it in half lengthwise so that the pattern side is on the outside and you have a folded edge. And you don't need to fold the entire piece at once. We can continue folding it as we work around the foam. Now hold this vertically so that the folded edge is on the left, and you're going to lay it on the edge of your foam disc, your flat foam disc, and then fold the top over and pin it in place. And our pins are longer than the width of this disc. So anytime you're pinning into the disc, be sure to put your pins on an angle so that they don't poke through the other side. Now bring that folded edge straight down over the edge of the disc and then pin it in place along the bottom of the foam, again angling your pins so they don't poke through the other side of the foam. Now keeping your piece folded in half, fold it upward on a bit of an angle, and you want to use the folded edge to cover the raw edge of the piece you just pinned in place. So you're just folding up on an angle, and you can decide to create your scribbles closer together or further apart. If you do them closer together, you're going to end up needing some more fabric, but you could even mix and match different fabric strips to make different stripes of color on your disc. So we folded it up and pinned along the folded edge. Now keeping that piece folded in half, you always want to make sure your raw edges are in line. Fold the piece back down, this time coming straight down instead of on an angle. And then pin in place at the bottom of the foam. And we're just going to keep creating this scribble, making sure to keep the raw edges of your piece in line. You're going to fold upward on an angle and pin, and then fold straight downward and pin, and you can see that you're covering the raw edges of the previous piece each time you do this. So continue this all the way around the edge of the disc until you run out of this fabric piece. All right, I'm down to the point where I can only fold this piece over one more time. And then once we finish off this piece, we can attach our second piece. And you want to take a look and make sure that half the foam is covered. If you haven't covered half the foam yet, then with your second piece, you're going to want to widen your scribble folds so that they cover more area. And if you've covered way more than half the foam, you can just keep going with that same distance and you'll just have extra fabric at the end. So now we're going to attach our second piece and we're just going to create the scribble fold in the same way. So we're just folding this piece in half lengthwise and you're just going to pick up wherever you left off. So my last piece folded straight down. which means I'm going to pin this new one at the bottom and then come up on an angle. If your last piece folded up on an angle, then you're just going to do the opposite. You'd pin it at the top and fold it straight down. And you can see as soon as we fold and pin this, it just continues on that same scribble fold. And you will just continue this to cover the second half of the disc. And when you reach your starting point, I will show you how to keep that overlapping pattern consistent to hide your raw edges. When you approach the starting point of your scribble fold, you're going to remove the 2 left-hand pins. So I'm removing the one from the top, and then I'm just pulling at this corner to tug out that one at the bottom. And you don't have to pull that one out all the way. You just want to pull it out from the foam a little bit. And then you can fold the edge of that scribble fold over to the right and out of the way. And then go ahead and finish off your last couple pleats here. Making sure, whoops, my raw edges are not lined up at all there. Gotta line those up before I complete this last fold. And then you want to make sure that the raw edges of this last fold will fall underneath the folded edge of your first one. So I'm folding that last piece down and pinning it in place. And then I'm going to return the left side of that first piece back into place. And you can see now that folded edge is covering the raw edge. And then we only have folded edges showing around the outside of the disc. And now our snowman scarf is complete. And if you're planning on adding a piece of felt to the bottom, now's the time to do that. So you can go ahead and cut out your felt circle. And once you've cut out that felt circle, just use your glue or glue dots to glue it to one open side of the foam disc. And then the other side is where we'll attach the top half of the snowman. Once you've glued the felt circle to the bottom of your ornament, you can now decide where you would like the front of your snowman to be. So you need to pick which side of your top piece of foam and which side of the bottom piece of foam you want to be the front of the ornament. Line up those 2 pieces and then also use your glue to glue these 2 pieces together. So go ahead and glue those pieces together now. And once those pieces are all attached together, we can start adding our trim and embellishments to really start making this look like an adorable little snowman. So the first thing we're going to do is use our long piece of trim to cover the gap between the scarf and the snowman. So you want to start your trim at the back center of the ornament. So whichever side you want to be the back of your snowman. And just laying the trim over that gap, you're going to pin it in place using a couple of pins. And you may end up wanting to use pins with embellishments to help hold this trim in place as well, because it might slide around a little bit. But what you're going to do is just wrap the trim around, covering that gap. And if you want to add some temporary pins to help hold it while you are waiting to see which embellishments you want to add, you can do that as well. So I'm just going to stick a couple pins in to help hold the trim in place as I'm wrapping it. And if you prefer to use a fabric band, you could fold a strip of fabric in thirds and wrap that around the top as well, if you'd rather use fabric than trim. And when you return to the starting point of the trim, you're just going to overlap those ends use a couple of pins to hold it in place again. Whoops, bent my pin there. And we're gonna add all these pieces, and then you can add embellishments to help cover up any raw edges later. So we're adding our trim, we're just gonna trim off that extra. And then later on, once we've added all of our pieces, if you want to add an embellishment there to cover those raw edges and pins, you can. And now we're going to do the same thing, this time wrapping the trim around the bottom edge of the scarf, just to give it another outline there. And of course, you can use temporary pins or pins with embellishments to help hold it in place. And you're just going to pin it and wrap it around the bottom. So I'm starting it at that same stopping and starting point there at the back of the ornament. Then I'm just going to wrap this around the bottom edge of the scarf. And this is why we added our felt first, because this trim helps to cover the edge of that felt a little bit. And the felt is just there to give the bottom of your ornament a finished look. It's not totally necessary if you're fine with some empty foam showing on the bottom. And when you return to the starting point, again, overlap your trim, pin it in place, and then cut off any extra. Now that scarf trim is added, you could either remove the temporary pins and add embellishments now, or I think I'm just gonna wait a moment to get the rest of my pieces added, and then I will pin this trim down with some pearl head pins. All right, now we need to add the piece of trim that creates the headband for the earmuffs. So just going right across the top center, covering all of those pins there. And you just want to start at one edge, just a little bit above the trim that you just added, and pin this in place. And then you're going to come straight across the center, covering that pin line. And if you have a little extra, you're just going to pin right above the other side of the trim and then just cut off that extra trim that you have. I'm actually going to move these pins up just a little bit. All right, now we can attach our snowman's earmuffs, and if you want to glue these on, you can, or you can just lay them right over the ends of that center piece of trim, and then you can use a pearl head pin to hold them in place. So a pin that's a little bit longer and decorative. You could also thread these pins with an embellishment if you wanted. For now, I'm just going to pin them in place, and I'll decide which embellishment I want to add a little bit later. Just going to do the same with the second earmuff along the other side. And now we can go ahead and add the snowman's face. So to do this, you are going to want your black straight pins and then either some black beads or black sequins. And you're just going to use these to create the eyes and the smiling face on the front of your snowman. And you can play around with the positioning of these because the way you place your eyes and your smile will really change up the look and the personality of your little snowman. So you can take your time and play around to figure out which arrangement you really like. And then you'll also want to use your orange pin threaded with your snowman nose bead to add the nose as well. So go ahead and play around until the face of your snowman looks just how you want it to. And once you're happy with your snowman's face, you can go ahead and add any other embellishments. So this means you can use pearl head pins, pins threaded with beads or sequins or charms, and go ahead and decorate the rest of your ornament, making sure you cover those end pieces of the trim at the back as well. If you need some embellishment ideas, be sure to check out the embellishment library on the Ornament Girl website to learn how to make different ribbon bows, hangers, and have lots of different ideas for embellishing your ornament. Once you've added all of your embellishments, I just have one more little trick left to show you, and that is that if you want your snowman to have rosy cheeks, you can use some blush and a soft makeup brush to just dab some powdered blush onto your snowman, and I suggest blowing off that extra blush off of the brush before you add it. And you can just start really light and continue adding as you go to give your snowman these cute little rosy cheeks. Once you have added all of those embellishments and the finishing touches, your bundled up ornament is complete. I hope you really enjoyed making this adorable little snowman along with me, and I can't wait to see all of the sweet bundled up ornaments that you create. For more free, no-sew quilted ornament patterns, be sure to subscribe to the Ornament Girl on YouTube. Thanks again, and happy ornamenting!